Global pandemic, local stories.
The podcast Global Pandemic, Local Stories was developed from collaborative activities between professors and students of Florida International University, FIU, and San Paulo State University, UNESP. Since November 2021, Professors Dr. Ming Fan from FIU and Dr. Luciani Taneni from UNESP worked together and created a virtual learning exchange project, which took place from March to April 2022. American and Brazilian students were grouped into 5 teams and used technical tools to work together. They collected information and interviewed people who faced educational challenges throughout the first 2 years of the COVID-19 pandemic. The very good results we have achieved encourage us to share with you interesting data and great stories from the US and Brazil.
Listening to this episode, you will learn more about the following topic: stories of combating fake news during pandemic. Stay with us.
Hello everybody, I'm Giovanna Coelho, a master's student at the State University of São Paulo, Brazil, and this is Invisible Dangers, Fake News and COVID-19. I'll be hosting this episode with my colleague Jasmine from Miami, Florida. Hi Jasmine!
Hello, welcome everyone. My name is Jasmine Williams and I'm a bachelor student at Florida International University. Thank you so much for having me, Giovanna. In this episode, we're going to unpack what fake news is and how it has impacted the local lives in our respective nations during the COVID-19 pandemic. Shall we get started?
Yes, let's do it!
The beginning of COVID-19's pandemic was like no other. I mean, who would have thought hundreds of thousands of people's first response to a lockdown would be to buy all of the toilet paper? What really made this pandemic stand out was the rampant sharing of news without fact-checking. In fact, this led to the World Health Organization to define this critical era of fake news spreading as an infodemic, which is a contraction between information and pandemic.
But what exactly is fake news? Well, generally, we use fake news to refer to any misleading news received. However, some researchers are calling this phenomenon information disorder, and they say there are 3 forms.
The first one is misinformation, the fake information that is not created with the intention to cause harm.
The second is disinformation, an information that is fake and created to harm a person, a social group, organization, or country.
And the third is malinformation, information based on the truth, but intentionally twisted, used to harm a person, a social group, organization, or country.
That's why it's very important to keep ourselves updated with reliable sources about this increasing problem in our society. During the COVID-19 pandemic, we were bombarded with a great amount of news, some arguing about the virus prevention, others stating that the virus wasn't even real. With that, many people found themselves absurdly confused with all the multiple and controversial information. I'm positive that even with all these different and difficult names, which may sound distant from our daily reality, fake news is still impacting people's lives on a daily basis.
According to Dr. Greg Nilacey, in his article, Fake News in the Age of COVID-19, people tend to believe anything they see or hear if the source seems official. It takes effort to validate sources when information is so accessible in our modern and highly technological society. Up next, we look at local stories. Our collection of local stories comes from 8 different people that each member of our teams interviewed. Among them, fake news and virus experts, and also people whose occupations weren't directly related to those fields of study. Let's take a look at what we've got.
Fake news is something similar to a virus. It spreads uncontrollably, and we need to avoid contact. Wise words from Lilia Cassati, a Brazilian biology teacher. Although she says that avoiding contact isn't enough and we need to be vigilant about the sources we come across. That's our duty as a society to protect each other from false claims. According to Fabiana Comesso, a Brazilian professor and researcher located at the State University of São Paulo, Brazil, anyone, even if they aren't a user of digital media, has come across misleading news about COVID-19.
That's insane. Even if you aren't an active user of social media, you can still be a victim to fake news. Right here in the States, we interviewed a philosophy student that attends Florida International University named Miguel. He says that he initially was hesitant to trust the validity of the virus and question its severity. Although once lockdowns were implemented, he soon came to realize it was a big issue. However, Miguel's skepticism continued as he didn't trust the vaccines because of how quickly they were made. He critiques how the government handled the pandemic in the US and how our president at the time, Donald Trump, downplayed the virus and aided in the massive spread of fake news, which led to his disbelief of it.
Wow, that's crazy. Some of our interviewees told us how they got informed during the pandemic. Celia Preti, a 58-year-old retired director of São Paulo State Network, points out that she usually discovers the main news from Brazil and the world through television. John Collins, a 25-year-old graduate from the University of Wisconsin-Madison, said that he usually follows what the federal officials recommend, although he believes that they haven't handled this pandemic in an appropriate fashion.
Well, it seems to me that a lot of our US interviewees are iffy on following government official recommendations because of how they handled the pandemic and Trump's massive spreading of fake news. Was this the case in Brazil too?
Yes, in Brazil, the president Jair Bolsonaro was one of the people responsible for fake news being spread. That's why Samara de Souza, a 21-year-old psychology student from Brazil, affirmed that she's pretty meticulous when it comes to reading the news, since the media has always promoted disinformation in order to foment this or that political interest.
If that's true, it means that fake news can be more dangerous than what it seems. In a study done in the US by John Kerr, 78% of those who participated could not tell the difference between real and false information provided to them about the pandemic. Even with differing public health policies, both Brazil and the US found their societies polarizing into those who believed in the validity of the virus and its public safety protocols and those who didn't believe in it at all.
We must not forget that we, as a society, have a part in this. But what exactly can we learn from the pandemic caused by these invisible dangers? That's what we're going to explore in our next section. A big lesson that we, as a society, could learn from the incident with fake news and COVID-19 is that we shouldn't underestimate the power of disinformation, which makes us think that maybe spreading fake news is not only about sharing false information, but is also related to political and ideological affiliations.
I totally agree. I also definitely think it's important to highlight that spreading fake news could be a powerful tool to increase the vulnerability of social minority groups, since these communities seem to be the most affected by the health and economic crisis caused by the COVID-19 pandemic.
The situation with fake news and the pandemic also showed the importance of promoting serious and effective political policies to the educational and scientific sectors. In times of disease, fear, and disinformation, good and critical education is the only way to escape.
Agreed. And throughout our research, we have learned that trying to correct false information once it's been published online is basically impossible.
That's why we would like to share with you all a small guide developed in 2018 by the Brazilian magazine Super Interessante to help us identify and fight fake news.
I heard this guide gives us really nice tips on how to prevent fake news.
Yep, the first thing we must do if you want to try to identify fake news is analysis. We need to be careful when we read a text, the news, a message, or any information before we share it with anyone else.
That's a really good way to start. And as the second tip says, we must do our own research. Ask yourself this: is the information reliable and verified in other news platforms? It's important to make sure that what we see or read is true.
And we can't be naive about this stuff. Keep in mind that in some articles and in some news stations, only certain parts of the information are shared with the audience. And listening to multiple perspectives is a good way to guard against fake news. Sometimes you can hold against facts just because they don't tell a story from your perspective.
Finally, our last and most important tip is denunciation. We must take action and denounce fake information no matter where they come from.
Yes, that's our responsibility as a society, and we must engage in actions to promote transparent communication, proper education on fake news, and credible information sources in order to make our society more accessible and safe.
Wow, there's such a complex universe about fake news. I think most people have no idea the damage fake information can cause.
For sure, Jasmine. I hope this episode can inform you, our listeners, about fake news, their impact on the COVID-19 pandemic, and how we can handle the situation from now on.
I'm really glad we talked about this, Giovanna. I hope you guys have enjoyed this episode of Invisible Dangers, Fake News, and COVID-19. I'm Jasmine speaking from Miami, Florida.
And I'm Giovanna from São José do Rio Preto, Brazil. Thank you so much for listening, and bye-bye, everyone. Or, as we say in Brazil, tchauzinho!
Invisible Dangers, Fake News and COVID-19 is a collaborative project done by Florida International University from the United States, among us São Paulo State University from Brazil.
We are grateful for the contributions of the interviewees, the technical support of Romulo Borim, Laboratory of Phonetics at UNESP, and the academic support of Stephanie Dotcher at FIU, the coordinator of the Collaborative Online International Learning COIL, and Ana Cristina Solomon at UNESP, the coordinator of the Brazilian Virtual Exchange, BRAVI. Give us your feedback, sending emails to mingfan at mifang@fiu.edu.
And Luciane Tenani at luciane.tenani@unesp.br. Thanks for listening.
Global pandemic. Local stories.